Hello again, and welcome to Matters of Mind. In this series, I discuss the books on Jordan Peterson's great book list in no particular order. My hope is to help those interested understand what they're getting into and choose the books which they decide to take on. Today, we're discussing Gulag Archipelago by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. So let's not waste any more time and let's get into it here on Matters of Mind. So I want to start with one main point. Good and evil exist in the hearts of all humans, and the line separating them oscillates, but never fully pushes one or the other permanently out of existence. If you remember that from this book, he's done his job. So what exactly is it we're reading here? Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelago takes us on a journey to both the depths of depravity and inspiration. So what I love about this book is it's what history is supposed to be. Instead of simply learning what happened, when it happened, and who made it happen, Solzhenitsyn looks at the nature of the people in these experiences and displays that nature for us. It's the ideas and the nature of humanity that we should be seeking out when reading history as a means of understanding ourselves and our humanity today. Now, when we're looking at the gulags, it's important to know that there just weren't a few dozen camps, but many throughout the complete landmass of the Soviet Union, which itself was larger than all of Europe. So check out this map. Now remember how massive the Soviet Union was. Each one of those little dots represents a camp. These camps housed anywhere between 2,000 and 10,000 humans at a time at each camp. Approximately 18 million people at one time or another were residents in these camps. They were being broken through mental and physical attacks for decades. But there were a few who didn't break. There were a few who held it together internally while their physical bodies were systematically destroyed. And that's where we see what humanity is made of. But before we go too far down that road, it's important to understand the context of this book and why it is so relevant. In the abridged version that I read, Anne Applebaum, who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author herself, provides an incredibly important context around how Solzhenitsyn came to be credited with writing a book that, at the very least, helped to bring down the Soviet Empire. But before he wrote Gulag Archipelago, he wrote a short fictional account of life in the camps. It was titled One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. In that book, he describes just one day in a labor camp, but he does it with such well-received prose and details that it became a lightning rod for any former inmate who read it. Luckily for Solzhenitsyn, the Soviet leader at the time, Khrushchev, was looking to separate himself from Stalin, the former leader of the Soviet Union who was in charge during the time when Solzhenitsyn was imprisoned. He wanted to show people that he's not Stalin, so he allowed its publication as a way to distance himself. What happened from there is what sparked Solzhenitsyn's inspiration to write the Gulag Archipelago. Thousands upon thousands of letters poured into Solzhenitsyn from people who read Ivan. They often described their own time in the camps, how they came to be arrested, and those interrogation techniques. From these personal accounts, along with any official state documents that he can get a hold of, Solzhenitsyn started putting together the manuscript for Gulag Archipelago. So by the time Solzhenitsyn was compiling this manuscript, the state had gone from celebrating him as a literary hero to perceiving him as an enemy of the state who was under constant surveillance. This is a good reminder of what happens when you live in a society that is so chaotic. There's no underlying principle of truth that you can follow that would guarantee your success. You never know what's going to happen. The world you live in can turn on a dime. So, in this situation, Khrushchev was now gone. Control over that Soviet narrative needed to be reclaimed, but that didn't stop Solzhenitsyn. He bobbed and weaved his way to writing 3 complete volumes of his account in the camps, along with several friends and colleagues that helped him along the way. But when the woman who was helping him type up the manuscript was found out by the KGB and then committed suicide, supposedly committed suicide, he decided it was time to release that manuscript. But he couldn't get it published in the Soviet Union, so he had to utilize something called the Sazimat system. It's a Soviet version of an underground publication system. So what people would do is somehow make it known that they wanted to read the book, and then somehow they would receive the book. But whenever they took delivery of the book, they only had 24 hours within which to read it. So anyone who would receive a copy would have to spend a whole day sitting in secret, reading as much as they could. And this is how the text first spread throughout the Soviet Union. If you choose to only read one chapter of this book, and I can understand why, because it's a lot to read and it's really dense, but if you read one, read the Blue Caps. It's in both the 3-volume set and the abridged version. Now, Blue Caps is what they called the state officials that had the power to imprison people. Now, the brilliant thing here is that Solzhenitsyn writes it not only from the perspective of a victim, but from the perspective of an oppressor as well. And he does this throughout the text. Because it's easy to read history and then assume that you'll be the shining light in the darkness, that you'll be the one they write about if and when you are in a situation where someone has to stand up to tyranny. But that is highly unlikely. Very few people do that. So we need to understand what it is that creates this oppressive mentality, what creates the tyranny, how that game works, and then assume that you will need to know how to avoid being that person that's tyrannical, just like you need to also understand how to resist that person who is the tyrant, because almost nobody is an actual hero. Now, as far as lessons learned, the most important lesson that I learned from reading the Gulag Archipelago is encompassed in the following quote. The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart, and through all human hearts. This line shifts inside us. It oscillates with the years. And even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. So it's easy to put blame on somebody else, but we need to focus inside, because tyranny doesn't necessarily live in some other country across an ocean. It doesn't live in a neighboring country waiting to invade at the first sign of weakness. It doesn't always just live in some other political party or other ethnic group or gender. It lives in your heart, it lives in my heart, and in the heart of every human being. So when looking for a map of the world of humanity, some kind of template to help you navigate your life, it's important to look for something that puts the ownership and responsibility for good in the world first and foremost on you and you alone. Anything that farms out responsibility and thus guilt onto any other individual or group of people will shift your attention away from the true threat that lives in your own heart. And that opens up the door for your deep and permanent tyrannical instinct to take hold. Now, this book is a true masterpiece, and it's easy to understand why Solzhenitsyn was awarded the Nobel Prize prior to even writing this book. He has a storytelling style that's deep, and he really investigates the human spirit. And in this case, he investigates in this important time in history and really brings it to life. You can really feel the spirit of all those involved as you read through his account of their experiences. I'll finish with a quote that explains exactly why Solzhenitsyn wrote this book. And thus it is that I am writing this book solely from a sense of obligation, because too many stories and recollections have accumulated in my hands, and I cannot allow them to perish. And that's exactly what he did with this book. You can hear the voices of these people, and he really shines a light on what it is that it takes for humanity to resist not only tyranny itself, but becoming tyrannical. I hope this short introduction can help you decide if it's something that you would like to read. And if you've read it, let me know what you thought about it and if it sparked any ideas for you. And as always, if you like and subscribe, it can be incredibly helpful. And I look forward to seeing you in the comments and next time here on Matters of Mind.